The episode opens with the devastating news of Salvador's death. Louis and the family are shocked to learn that their closest family friend died in what appears to be a car accident. Louis now starts to believe something is just not right. He remembers Salvador warning him about upcoming dangers and handing him the paper that contains an address. Louis then decides to go to the location and investigate on his own. In the meantime, Julia spends the night with Carlos, to her surprise and dismay. He tells her he must leave at least for her safety. She then heads to work with Hugo as they too learn about the shocking news. Arriving at work, Julia brings over breakfast for Sergio and Marta, who are still asleep. The children are clearly very tired because they were squeezed the whole night. While Louis is disturbed by his best friend's death, Alma doesn't seem to be least shaken. She gets ready for her big meeting with the president, as she plans to forward the project for the cure to the next stage. Daniela worries her mother should be supporting her father during this difficult time, but Alma assures her that everything will be all right once she gets the president by her side. On the other hand, Louis arrives at the location, accompanied by Hugo. He has to fulfill his promise to Salvador, which brings him to a shocking delivery. Apparently, the address turns out to be Salvador's girlfriend Clara's apartment. What's more is she is pregnant with his child. Clara is also very terrified of what happened to Salvador. She strongly believes he was murdered and that his death was framed as an accident. Just then, Louis has duty calls, so he must leave the apartment. He orders Hugo to look after Clara for the time being. Meanwhile, back at the minister's mansion, Julia is still pampering the kids as she gets them ready for the day. During this time though, she notices a drop of blood on the floor, leaving her in a confused state of mind. Back at Clara's apartment, Hugo finds her bleeding profusely in the main bedroom. Meanwhile, we also see Carlos, keeping an eye on them from a distance, under the orders of Major Enrique. Carlos is only working for the Major in exchange for keeping his mother and Julia safe. Hugo insists to Clara that they have to go to the hospital, but she refuses to see anyone as she is too afraid that those who killed Salvador will also come after her. Despite her protest, Hugo manages to get her in the car and take her to Emilia's place. Emilia checks her vitals and believes Clara might have a miscarriage. Clara suddenly wakes up, having passed out from excessive blood loss, and starts fretting. She is completely disoriented as she expresses deep fear that her baby would be taken. She then warns Emilia that those people who murdered Salvador are somewhat involved in a cult. They take children from the streets, from parents, and soon the world will be without children. Confused, Emilia and Hugo try their best to calm down Clara. In the meantime, Alma arrives at the president's residence and reports on her recent development with the cure. The president then signs her proposal, giving Alma a long sigh of relief. However, it is not yet clear what she has planned to do in that proposal, which she calls the Omega Plan. Elsewhere, Hugo arrives at the minister's place and informs Louis about Clara's condition. Louis immediately rushes to Emilia's place to see the poor woman. At the same time, we see Begona handing over the block's keys to an assassin. Apparently, the assassin is here to kill Clara, so he heads to the block and readies his equipment so that he can get a good view of the target. Louis arrives at Emilia's apartment, where Clara continues to warn everyone that her baby will be taken. She also tells Louis that Salvador died because of their own people, meaning the culprit is perhaps someone they know. Clara lashes out at Louis when he calls her delirious. She points out that Louis also didn't listen to Salvador when he had warned him the other night. Just then, Alex, who is closing the store for the day, notices the assassin aiming his rifle towards Emilia's apartment. Terrified, he rushes to her place and warns everyone to stay low. Moments after, gunshots are fired through the glass windows. Panicking, Hugo alerts everyone to lie low as he tries to close the windows. Thankfully, nobody is hurt and Louis tells Emilia to call her people for help. Meanwhile, Julia finds Marta and Sergio watching a disturbing video that shows a group of children on a remote farm. Sergio tells the party that it is one of his aunt's movies. Julia hurries them for lunch, and while the children head out, she pauses the movie and notices that all the children are the same age as Marta Sergio. After she found the pint of blood on the floor that morning, and now this disturbing video, she has even more questions on her mind. Back at Emilia's place, the group gets ready to transport Clara to safety. Rosa and her friends have come to their aid, but there are snipers, including Carlos, keeping an eye on their target. Hugo and Alex accompany Clara, who is hooded to hide her identity, while Rosa's father waits for them in a vehicle nearby. Just when Carlos gets a clear shot of the target, Julia arrives at the scene and hugs Hugo. This clearly affects Carlos' aim as he doesn't want to risk Julia's life. During this time, Hugo and the group manage to slip away and safely put Clara in the awaiting vehicle. While transporting though, the rescue team is stopped by the security forces. The soldiers demand them to hand over the hooded woman. However, much to their surprise, the hooded person turns out to be none other than Rosa, who swapped places with Clara. Clara, on the other hand, reveals to be transported in Louis' car. Although the soldiers ask the minister for permission to inspect the car, Louis, rightfully using his state power, denies it. Consequently, Clara is transported safely to the other side of the city. Before parting though, Louis apologizes for their loss and assures Clara that he will protect her and the baby at all cost. This is something he owes to his dear friend Salvador. In a flashback to 25 years ago, young Louis and Salvador are fishing by a lake. Just then, Louis gets a call from the hospital. Alma is having their first child, Ivan. The two boys then pack up their things and drive down the coastal road. As they chat, Salvador decides to be the godfather of Louis' children. We are suddenly brought back to the present as Louis, having helped Clara out, sits alone in the car by the same coastal road. He is understandably grieved following the loss of his only friend. He heads back to the funeral being held at his house, where Julia and Hugo do their best to keep their emotions in check. Everybody at the funeral wonders where Louis is, as he hasn't shown up since yesterday. Just then, he shows up, looking like a wreck, and marches up straight to Major Enrique. Louis demands a word from the Major as there was a shooting attempt yesterday. Enrique brushes the concern by saying that they were trying to put down a terrorist. He even chides the minister, asking if Louis was with the terrorist. There is an obvious tension between the two men. It is also revealed that now that a minister's position is open, rumors are circulating that Major Enrique will be promoted soon. But it seems like Alma was unaware of this, so she asks her lover about the position. Major Enrique then tells her that he might be promoted to vice president, which surprises Alma herself. After their little chat, Alma follows her husband upstairs and asks him where he was the whole night. Louis keeps mum now that he believes Alma is also a part of something big. He points out that he hasn't been asking about her secret, so she shouldn't demand it either. Hearing his words, Alma struggles to keep it together while Louis decides to head back to Clara's apartment, but refuses to tell Ivan or his wife where he is going. Little Sergio enters his aunt's room, but he is scolded instead. In a fit of rage, Alma tells Julia to take him with her. Meanwhile, Carlos is given his next assignment, which just so happens to be associated with Emilia. He follows her as Emilia starts searching through Clara's apartment. At the same time, she hears footsteps approaching, so quickly holds up her gun. But it turns out that it is none other than Louis, who is also snooping around the apartment, trying to find any clue about his friend's sudden death. Emilia admits to searching for evidence as well. In the meantime, Carlos happens to be listening to their conversation from the other room. When Louis sees the open closet, he realizes someone else has been inside the room, prompting the duo to collect up their things and hurry away. They embrace heartily outside just before they part ways. In the meantime, Sergio and Julia make it past the checkpoint. The little boy is reunited with his friend Marta at Emilia's store. Hugo, Julia, and the kids go to the market to have some fun together. They begin dancing on the street, prompting Sergio to follow suit. Unfortunately, the couple becomes too preoccupied with their work and loses sight of Sergio. Hugo, Julia, and Marta start calling out the little boy's name as they search the streets for him. At one point, Marta discovers Sergio's spectacles on the floor, which serves as an important clue. Alex eventually locates Sergio outside the store with an elderly man. While the old man flees, he manages to save the child. Meanwhile, Ivan gets home to discover the Major snooping around. He doesn't appear to be bothered though and waves him away. Instead, Major Enrique speaks to Alma and shows her images of Louis and Emilia together, branding her husband a traitor and manipulating the facts to make it appear as though he's having an affair. Surprisingly, Alma, who pretends to be a good judge of character, believes her lover. Suddenly, Daniela arrives and informs her mother that she would be visiting Salvador's grieving wife Laura later that day. As the Major departs, Alma notes how he did them a favor. Louis later returns home to discover his son Ivan drunk on his Porsche. Ivan is still grieving over the death of his godfather. Louis reminds him that Salvador always loved him and cared for him. At this time, Ivan, while still drunk, mentions to his father that his mother and Major Enrique have something going on between them. He also warns that their mother has been with Enrique, and he shouldn't trust her. Back at Emilia's house, the old man from earlier and a couple appear at the door, claiming that their son is there. Hugo and Julia reluctantly invite them in to hear their story. It is revealed that when the couple's son was just an infant, He was transferred to a hospital, and they never saw him again. He could be one of the children Alma abducted for her research. Hugo and Julia refuse to believe them, but not when the couple mentions the strict features of Sergio when he was small. This includes the child having 2 moles behind his ears as well as being allergic to nuts. When they examine Sergio's ear, Hugo and Julia notice 2 moles right below. It is finally confirmed that Sergio is in fact the couple's long-lost child. They then reunite with their son, but Hugo interrupts them, saying that they must return Sergio to the minister's mansion. If they do not, they could all be in a lot of trouble. However, the parents aren't ready to depart with their son once again. Hugo begs them to learn to reason, and they eventually do. He then assures them that he will talk with the minister about the matter and have it sorted. But when Hugo and Julia return the child, they learn that neither Louis nor Alma has made it home that day. With this in mind, the couple seizes the chance to take away Sergio once again. As the episode comes to a close, Carlos sneaks into Emilia's place to warn Julia about something he has discovered. It turns out that he had retrieved a pen from Clara's apartment earlier, which consists of the information on Alma's unique test subjects, including Sergio and Marta, along with several missing children. He then warns Julia that Marta is in danger and dashes into the darkness just before Bigona approaches. Later, Julia and the whole family look into the pen and find a projection that shows the proof of missing children who have been kept as test subjects by Alma. Subscribe to see more videos like this, turn on the notifications, and leave a like to help the channel out. Thanks for watching.